was the most unexplained, supernatural, or paranormal event you've ever witnessed? Story 1. I heard my 2-year-old daughter talking in her room in the middle of the night. I went in and asked her what she was doing. She said, talking to Samantha. She's on the ceiling. My wife had a miscarriage a few months prior. It was a girl. We were going to name her Samantha. Okay, I mean, alright, that does sound scary. Don't get me wrong. That does sound scary. But let's play a little devil's advocate. How did we not know they weren't talking about the girl's name in another room and their daughter just so happened to hear it? They just said the daughter is 2 years old. And surely, if they were going to name it Samantha, that means they must have had to kind of communicate that at one point. So is it possible that the daughter just heard about this and then said that, Story 2. You should know that I consider myself to be a very rational person. I'm not superstitious, and I don't believe in psychic powers or the supernatural. My best friend, Travis, and I used to play guitars together almost every day. That's not important now. It will be later. One day, we decided to go to the beach with our girlfriends and take some mushrooms. After a little while, when the mushrooms were kicking in, Travis said that he wanted to wander off alone, so I stayed with our girlfriends. We all had a great time. As the sun began to set, Travis' girlfriend asked me, "Where's Travis?" None of us knew where he was, but I could hear him playing the guitar, so I suggested that we just follow the sound of the music until we got to him. The girls told me that I must have a really good hearing because they couldn't hear anything. I said, well, I can definitely hear it, so just follow me. Now here's the strange part. I followed the sound for several minutes into the forest and went directly to him. But when we reached him, he did not have a guitar, and I realized that we left our guitars at home. I still had no idea how that happened. Story 3. My dad died in a house fire in 1991. I was home at the time, on the other side of the house from him. He was sleeping at the time. When I tried to wake him to get him out of the house by breaking a window and trying to jump into his room, I heard him say something, but I don't know what. I never told anyone in the family that he woke up, and the firefighters / doctors or whoever, I really don't remember, said he never did wake up. He didn't die immediately. It was 3 days later of smoke inhalation. A few days later, after he died, my sister told me she had a dream where he wanted her to let me know that he was telling me to get away from the house. I've still never told her he woke up. Alright, the dreams is a trippy thing because I do hear this a lot. I've read a lot of stories, and for somehow, when relatives end up kind of passing away, I've seen this story a lot where they'll somehow send a message through a dream. It's very, very weird, but it's also very interesting. Story 4. I'm late to this thread, but reading some of these has compelled me to post. This isn't my story, but my mom's. She's an extremely rational person, but this event caused her to have such severe panic attacks that she had to return and live with her parents for 6 months. All of this had happened a few years before I was born. My mom's first husband was a Navy pilot during the Gulf War. The carrier was about 10 days into its cruise and operating with complete radio silence. She hadn't heard anything from the ship since it left, but that was to be expected. This was a war. On that night, about 10 days into the cruise, my mom woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. She saw her husband standing in the room. It wasn't an ethereal form either. It appeared solid and utterly the same. The only thing different about him was that his head was shaved. He only had one thing to say: goodbye. This whole experience startled my mom, and she couldn't get back to sleep. She went to the kitchen to get some water when the doorbell rang. All military wives know what the late night doorbell means. Her husband had suffered a massive heart attack and died aboard the carrier. She was grief-ridden, but reasoned that the partition had been a hallucination born of the stress of having a spouse deployed. Besides, with his head shaved, he didn't even look that familiar. Her mother and mother-in-law flew out immediately to plan for the funeral and receive the body. She stayed strong until the first viewing the body. Her lifeless husband was bald. In a letter from his NFO, the shaved head was explained as the result of a lost bet. There had been no way of knowing that his head had been shaved, and my mom suffered a minor mental break. Story 5. My wife and I were getting dinner on the table. Our 4-year-old son was in the adjoining room and said, "Hey, that's the job I had in my last life." He's looking at the TV, and there's a man shaping metal over a fire. We were shocked because we had never discussed reincarnation with him, or even with each other in his presence. We're atheist. I tried to get him to elaborate, but he just went back to what he was doing like he never said it. Story 6. Oh yeah, when they were toddlers, both my kids told me about their previous selves. My daughter complained about how the elders used to make her cover up her entire body with long dark robes, but now people walk around almost naked, and it's much better. My son told me that the last time he was stuck under thick ice and couldn't get out, and then he died and came to me. Both times the kid immediately returned their attention to the mundane task at hand. I'm sure there's a logical explanation in the mystery that is the non-linear toddler mind, but when they blurt stuff like that out, it can give you chills. Jesus Christ. Dude, if my kid did that, I would go see a priest immediately. I'm not around. No, you're not about to be doing that. You're gonna get baptized, we're gonna see a priest, we're gonna get this resolved. I can't just stand there and be a bystander of what I just saw. Because listen to me, if I'm just chilling with my kid and my kid turns around around to me. He's like, hello, Dad, it's me. I was in the medieval war. I used to be a knight. I'm like, what the you say? And then they just like, what do you say, Daddy? Dude, I'm no. They're going to a priest. You know, I'm going to the highest caliber of priest because I don't for that. Story 7. During most of my life, my mother ran a daycare. One of the kids was named Dylan. Dylan was really smart and somewhat rebellious, but not a jerk kid. We all liked him, but he was always a bit off. So one day he's sitting at the kitchen table eating snacks, the other kids were done, and it was just him and my mom. He had some carrots left, but was out of juice. My mom asked him if he wanted more. His response freaks us out today, almost 20 years later. Keep in mind, he was up to like 7 when this happened. I was visiting and making a sandwich, and this crap happened. Well, miss, I'd prefer some whiskey, if you wouldn't mind obliging me. What? Whiskey? No, with a laugh. Begging your pardon, miss, but it's been a long day. I've come a long way. I'm going to turn in soon, and I'm not here to cause any trouble. I've heard you have whiskey, and I'm more than happy to pay for it. I'm having a good week. This made no sense. This was a little kid. Our family certainly had no whiskey in the house. We were teetotalers. His parents rarely let him watch TV, let alone old-timey westerns. But here he was, accent and all, sounding like Jeff Bridges in True Grit. My mom, though, just reacted, no, Dylan. No, whiskey for you, orange juice. She set down a sippy cup of the OJ goodness. Ma'am, that's just not going to cut it. I came all the way down from Wyoming, and by tarnation, I'm a man who wants some whiskey. If you can't provide it, then I'll find someone who can. He stood up, made for the front door, and got it open before my mom grabbed him. Presto, he was back to normal. Can I have some juice? Nothing he did during this time was him. His body language was different, his voice was way lower, and he was totally into what he was doing. It happened a few times after that. At some point, later, when I wasn't there, my mom asked him who he was. He gave a name that was something along the lines of Thomas Jeremy Armstrong. She got really into it and started asking about his life. He was apparently a lumber prospector and trader who lived his later years somewhere north of Sacramento. We were in Washington State. And a wife who died from a fever. The kid was in the 1st grade. My mom then asked when he was born, and he said December 14th, 1856. It was a Sunday. Sure enough, it was an effing Sunday. This kind of stuff has always held a mild fascination for me. But this kid was something else. I have no idea how this works, but it's freaky to this day. Jesus. See, this is kind of motivating me to probably never have kids. Because if my kid did this to me, what the fuck do you do in a situation like this? Because sure, like how the fuck does a kid pull a deeper voice, a perfect accent, and somehow guess the same exact day? Like granted, you know, if he's guessing a Sunday on a specific day, he has a 1 in 7 chance of doing that. But it seems so effortlessly. It's just like, how the fuck possible? Story 8. I have a lot of stories, but I'll go with my favorite. My grandpa, who was a tough as nail World War II Marine vet, had a little stuffed bunny. He kept it out in the open, and when he would walk past it and thought no one was looking, he would pet it. Big old tough guy petting a little stuffed animal in adorable secrecy. It was an ongoing family joke. Anyways, he committed S, and we all went to the house to deal with the police, and me and everything. We stayed in the house that night, and it had an overall creepy vibe because of what had happened. We were all naturally upset and struggling and doing dumb things to try and make ourselves laugh to try to deal with it. And we realized the bunny has been moving. Like it would be on the dining table, and then we would see it in the den an hour later. I thought someone was doing it as a joke, but everyone swore they wouldn't do that, and we never caught anyone doing it. I kept an eye on that bunny the entire week, never saw anyone touch it, but it would still be moved. I think Granddad was playing jokes on us. Not the most convincing or scary story, but I like it. His cell phone also called his landline. That was weird. Story 9. Me and some buddies were smoking hash. Around 3 a.m., we decided to play Bloody Mary. 2 of my buddies and I went, and nothing happened. Then Allie went in, said Bloody Mary 3 times, and came back unscathed. While he was grinning about the fact that we're such fools to believe something would happen, his nose began to bleed. When he realized that, he got into semi-shock and just sat in one place, shivering like it was minus 30 degrees. The rest of us just went numb and sat there trying to contemplate what the F just happened. Alright guys, I'm gonna be honest, it was not that serious. Like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna break this little imagination game right now. You guys were smoking weed. This guy got a random nosebleed at what was supposed to be like a scary thing. That was it. I feel like it was just because these guys were like already kind of smoking the reefer that these guys started kind of getting the paranoia, if you know what I mean. Story 10. I was spending the night at a friend's house as a kid, around 12 to 13. Parents were home, so we decided to go out, do some ding-dong ditching, get into some young, angsty debauchery. We get home, and it's around 1 or 2 in the morning. Cue a ringing of the doorbell. Naturally, we think it's the cops or a pissed-off neighbor. My friend had a small window that looked out onto the front porch that you couldn't really see into from outside, so we took a peek at who was calling at such a late hour. Standing at the door was an old woman in a dress and a young boy in a weird, newsy outfit. Both were dressed extremely out of period. as this was the 90s and my friend had never seen either in the neighborhood before. We ducked because we're a bit freaked. Look again, no less than 20 seconds later, and they're both gone. Nobody on the street walking away, no cars driving away, they were just gone without a trace. We did not sleep well. Story 11. Somewhere out in the mountains near Mammoth, California as a kid, my dad, myself, and a few family friends were out gazing at the stars. Being as I was from LA, I think it was the first time I'd ever seen the stars without light pollution, so I was fascinated. I pointed out to a cluster of 3 stars and said, "Hey look, it's Orion's belt." My father corrected me and showed me that Orion's belt was elsewhere. So I asked, "Well, what constellation is that then?" And pointed back to the one from before. He conceded that it did look very similar to Orion's belt, but that he just couldn't tell what it actually was. A little while later, what appeared to be the middle star of the 3 started moving quickly. It zigzagged through the sky for several seconds before its brightness intensified, and then just like that, it disappeared. To this day, the only thing I can think of that it could possibly be was some kind of experimental drone. But this was in the early 90s, and I'm not sure drones existed back then. And if it was a drone, it must have been a damned advanced one because it stood still for long enough that myself and several adults nearby all thought it was a star. Anyway, kind of boring story I guess, but that's the only thing I've ever seen in my life that I can't really explain scientifically. Story 12. My mom passed when I was 7. Flash forward to middle school, we were at this band clinic thing at my mom's old high school. Each school prepared their own piece with their bands, and then we all got the same piece to do together, if that makes sense. Anyways, we were all waiting around to get back on stage to play with everyone, and we're just chatting away as a group. I looked over, and at the back of the room was a woman who looked identical to my mom. Same red hair, glasses, height, everything. I caught her looking at me a few times and smiling at me. Turned to tell some friends about it, and by the time I looked back, she was gone, and I didn't see her after that. Also, I graduated with a French award from high school. I did my walk across the stage, obligatory photo with my department head, who I'm close with. Looking out at the crowd, 3 rows behind my dad, stepmom, and aunt, I saw the same lady from before. Super eerie, but also kinda nice. Story 13. I lived in a haunted house with 3 roommates. They lived there for a couple weeks before I did and swore up and down that a young woman was haunting the house. One of them said they had some incest manually extinguished when they weren't home. Another one said they were feeling around in the dark looking for a light switch and felt the hair on top of someone's head. Someone that wasn't there when the light came on. I, being a good and proper atheist, and knowing my roommates were kind of potheads, thought it was all bullocks and that they were paranoid. A month or so after I moved in, I was laying in bed when I heard a girl crying in the hallway. 2 of my roommates were girls, so I got up to do the requisite investigating counseling. I opened my door to see who it was, only discovered that I was the only person home at the time. I'm still not a major believer in the supernatural, but I won't rule anything out now. Listen, if I felt the top of someone's head in the dark and no one was there, oh my god, I think at that point, I couldn't even risk moving houses. I would have to move the state. Story 14. Not me, but my stepfather's best friend, call him Jim, has supposedly been experiencing paranormal activity since he was a teenager. He's a court reporter. Stepdad was a speechwriter. Very skeptical and stoic guys. There were countless stories. They got in an elevator full of people in downtown Atlanta, stopped at a floor that was all kinds wrong, 1940s decor, abandoned, dusty. Then the elevator went back down and opened on the opposite side of the building. Jim's dog died. A week later, the stereo turned on by itself and started playing a song Jim loved to play for his pet. No CD inside. Yeah, it snowed the night before, and there were paw prints in the backyard leading to the house, but none near the gate. He frequently finds giant piles of coins on his pillow. He lived in London for a time, thinking he'd escaped the spirit, which had begun to scratch him hard on his arms and legs. After 6 months, he found a little pile of pennies in his bed, even though he hadn't been carrying American coinage. I personally witnessed one strange event while Jim was around. Was walking down the stairs and felt someone whip past my head and heard it hit the wall. Looked down and saw a quarter dated 1948. I thought my sister was messing with me, but she was down at the lake with everyone else. Story 15. When I was around 6 or 7, we had a cat that had kittens. We knew it had kittens because it was pregnant and then it wasn't anymore. The problem was that we had no idea where the kittens were. I was wondering about it and looked right at the cat and sort of thought in my mind, where are your kittens? But without using words, if that makes any sense. Immediately the location came into mind. It was through some broken boards just above our porch that our cat could jump into from pillars on the side of the porch. I knew that they were there. I walked straight over there, climbed onto the stone pillar, and looked through the hole in the boards. The kittens were right there. I've never had a similar experience like that again in my life. Alright, I don't want to be a pessimist. Yeah, it's a cool story, I know, but come on, is it really that crazy? Be like, wait a second, there's one location that we've not checked. Maybe it's this location. Are you just kind of using common sense in this story? Is this really that paranormal? Story 16. I was watching my parents' dog while they were out of town. My sister passed away in their house about a year prior. While I was there, I witnessed a picture of her fall off the wall. Then I discovered that every picture of her in the house had fallen off the wall, seemingly at the same time. They didn't keep many pictures up in general, so it was only 4 different pictures. I chalked it up to something shaking the house, even though we live in Ohio and I felt nothing. I went home to my apartment. Face up on my desk was a picture of my sister and me that I knew I had packed away. I don't believe in things like this, but this occurred at a time where I was still very much actively grieving the loss of my sister, and it hit me hard. I still can't explain it. Story 17. I was staying at a hotel while visiting family, and I ran back up to our suite to grab something before heading out to dinner. I noticed my brows were a little off, so I grabbed my eyebrow brush to touch them up, as well as a lip gloss to apply. I sat the brush on top of the chest of drawers, next to the TV stand that sat on the chest. Standing right next to the chest, in front of a mirror on the wall, I applied my lip gloss. I then went to grab my eyebrow brush, but it was gone. I looked under the TV stand on the dresser, underneath the dresser, all over where I knew I left it, over the course of about 2 minutes. As I finally checked again under the TV, I heard a drop on the carpet like something had fallen, and there, in the middle of the floor, at least 4 feet away from the dresser, was my brush. No idea how it got there, or how I heard it drop as I was looking for it. Several seconds after, I noticed it was missing from where I put it. No idea how it got there, or how I heard it drop as I was looking for it. Several seconds after I noticed it was missing from where I put it. There's no way it would have ended up in that spot from where I set it. And I heard it drop after I saw it was gone from where I put it. This seems like a dumb story, but I slept with the lights on regardless. Alright, well, here's my little theory. Maybe a rat just grabbed it. I could easily just see a rat, like, perfectly timing that shit, you know? Like, okay, the lady's looking away, let's go snatch the brush, and then throw it 4 feet away, you know? I could totally see that. Story 18. So much paranormal crap happened to me when I was a kid. One that has always stuck was when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Back then, I used to randomly wake up in the middle of the night really often for no known reason. I was still sleeping in my parents' bed at the time, so I'd just lay in bed and look around. I swear, every effing time I'd look at the doorway to the living room, I would see 2 really tall figures standing there. They looked like the old farm couple in the one painting, except they had hollow eyes and they were thinner. They never really didn't do anything but stare back at me first. One night was especially weird. I woke up as usual and saw them standing there, standing right in front of the doorway again. Only this time something felt a bit more off than usual. The ceiling fan was on high and the blades were going so fast that the entire fixture was moving back and forth. I looked back at the figures and they have some really dark, creepy grins on their face. I got scared and buried myself in the blankets, hoping to go away. Then all I heard was the ceiling fan spinning even faster somehow. The beads at the end of the switches were tapping against the glass light cover fiercely. I peeked up out of my covers and the 2 figures were right next to the bed, standing right over me with these ugly smiles. I screamed bloody murder, and the glass cover on the light came off and shattered on the ground. My dad jumped out of the bed immediately and turned on the light to see what happened, but the 2 figures were gone already. I was crying hysterically. It took my mom a long time to calm me down. So much other stuff went on while I lived there. That was the worst house I've ever lived in.